Now, welcome back to News in Focus. Now, yesterday, ANC Deputy President Paul Mashatile said the party's internal structure should be, quote-unquote, allowed space and time to look into Minister of Justice Thembi Simelane's corruption allegations linked to the now defunct VBS Mutual Bank. Now, two publications, News 24 and Daily Maverick, reported that Simelane unlawfully invested municipal funds in the bank when she was the mayor of Polokwane. Now, she's believed to have benefited around 500,000 rand from a loan from the same company that facilitated the illicit investment in the bank. Now, the big question that comes about is how much of a litmus test this is going to be for the ANC, given that it also needs to, as the party with probably the most seats in the government of national unity, they still need to go ahead and account to some of its GNU partners. You saw, of course, in Parliament on Friday, its own GNU partners ramping up the pressure to allow there to be accountability from the ANC on Simelane. Joining us now, I'd like to welcome Lawson Naidoo, who is the Executive Director for the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Naidoo, this is a massive litmus test for the ANC, isn't it? Given that this is supposedly seen as one of the big scandals to emerge just after the elections.
Yes, it is. But I think it's important that we separate the response from the political party, the African National Congress, to the response from the president and from the government itself. Insofar as the ANC is concerned, we know that they have a step-aside rule in place. But we've seen that is generally applied rather loosely and inconsistently. So I don't think we should hold out too much hope of the ANC acting decisively in respect of these allegations against Minister Simelane.
Yeah, I want to talk about that step-aside rule because, I mean, you've mentioned it now. It's something that has been used loosely. It's something when you look at it, it's like, any citizen of the country who's got supposedly faith in the step-aside rule would look at it and say, well, there is probably a lack of it. How much now does the ANC really need to put its foot down, given that this is VBS Bank and it's been a scandal that has really been haunting South Africa for the past close to a decade?
Yeah. Look, I mean, just on the ANC issue, the step-aside rule really says that, people must step aside if they are charged with a criminal offense of corruption or, something of that nature. Now, there have been no formal charges that have been laid against the minister, so it's unlikely that the ANC step-aside rule will kick in. But I think this is a bigger test for President Ramaphosa himself. Now, we know that ministers in the cabinet and members of the National Executive serve as at the pleasure of the president. He has the right to hire and fire and without having to give reasons. He doesn't give us reasons when he hires people, and there's no need for him to do so. So he has to make a judgment call as to whether these allegations surrounding his Minister of Justice are serious enough to warrant that government takes action, and that he as the president takes action in order to preserve the integrity of his own reform agenda, put the interests of the country first, and not the interests of an individual. And that, for me, is really what lies before the president at this point in time. The answers that have been preferred by the minister, both previously in the media and then on Friday in Parliament, are clearly not sufficient to quell this issue. She has not answered all of the questions that are legitimately being posed to her. For example, why she sought her loan from an entity that was not registered as a financial services provider. Why, like any other South African, she just didn't go to her bank or another a reputable finance institution to raise this money. She hasn't answered the question of where she got the money from to repay the loan so quickly when the business had hardly been up and running.
Mr. Naidoo, when President Cyril Ramaphosa came in as the president of the country back in 2018, he was, of course, seen as this anti-corruption crusader. 6 years on, it's sort of like 5 steps forward, 20 steps back. In your view, is enough being done under, of course, this being his second term of his presidency, enough being done really to root out corruption? Now, I know it's not a magic wand that's going to happen immediately, but do you feel a situation like this now allows him an opportunity to say, right, I've got these GNU partners right here. They're looking with me in a magnifying glass. They're waiting to see the move that I'm going to make. Whatever the charges do come on, and of course, we have to wait for the ANC Integrity Commission to come. But let's just say the commission comes out and finds her guilty of this, and she is forced to step aside. This is going to be a huge test for him as the president of the country. And you mentioned it quite well. It is his prerogative whether he can hire or fire ministers. A massive one for him, isn't it?
It is indeed. And, like I said, it's really for the president, it's really a question of putting the interests of the country first, putting the interests of this government of national unity, as he calls it, putting those interests, because, these are the kinds of political issues that could, create tension and divisions within this very newly established government of national unity. So the president really does need to consider his options here. And I think, even if there are no charges that have been forthcoming as yet, that it's incumbent on the president to take some action to demonstrate his seriousness about combating corruption. You speak about the time that, he's been president for 6 years now. I think there has been some progress in regards to fighting corruption, but clearly, far from sufficient to satisfy, public concerns about it. We have seen some high-profile people, including the former Speaker of the National Assembly, facing charges, former ministers, Isi Kodwa and others. So there is action being taken. Is it too slow? Probably yes. But we also know that, the NPA and the investigating directorate within the NPA need access to greater resources, not just financial, but human resources, getting the necessary skills in place to be able to prosecute some of these, sometimes quite complex corruption cases. I'm not suggesting that this particular case is necessarily complex, but as I was saying earlier, the answers that the minister has provided so far, fall way beyond the level of dispelling this issue.
And Lawson, when you think about, of course, this portfolio, justice, and the importance of it, and I know we've always, as a country, looked at the Justice Ministry as something of upholding the Constitution, number one, and of course the rule of law. And it just happens that, Minister Simelane seems to be having these allegations against her. And whatever the outcome is, if the outcome is negative towards her, President Cyril Ramaphosa, as a president's prerogative, is going to have to choose whoever is going to be next quite carefully, given the fragility of this very same portfolio.
Well, indeed. And I think it's important perhaps to stress at this point that it is the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And that I think, so there's clearly a perception that exists right now that the minister is compromised, that it undermines the credibility of the whole justice system, not just the Ministry and Department of Justice. It impacts on the National Prosecuting Authority. And these are real perceptions that exist out there. And the president really has to take this into account, as I said, to demonstrate his commitment to work, to supporting the initiatives being taken by the NPA, the investigating directorate, and the Hawks in combating, corruption of this nature.
One final question, Mr. Naidoo. A massive test for the Constitution, a massive test for the executive. Everyone's watching us, aren't they? Really to see what's going to come out of this, given that this is VBS. It's a scandal that has really rocked so many, elder South Africans of many of their savings. And it was really seen as a bank that could enhance, these communities that were in need of it. So it's a huge test for really the Constitution and the executive, isn't it?
Well, I'm not so sure that it's a test for the Constitution. I think the Constitution is quite clear on matters like this, that the NPA must be left to investigate and prosecute without fear or favor or prejudice. And I don't think there's been any suggestion that there's political interference in the operations of the NPA, political influence in trying to determine who should or should not be charged and face court proceedings. But the perception will be there that because this is the minister that has some responsibility over the NPA, that there might be undue interference in those processes. And it is for that very reason that I think it's really important for the president to act, and to act swiftly, not wait for the ANC's Integrity Commission to come up with the recommendation. We know that that's likely to take many months to happen. So the president really needs to exercise his discretion, demonstrate his commitment, and be able to sit around the cabinet table with these partners in government and say, we have a commitment for clean governance, and I've now taken the appropriate action. Whether that is to dismiss the minister or to suspend her temporarily whilst the investigation continues, I think he must be seen to be doing something.
Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
That's Lawson Naidoo, CASEC Executive Director. Yeah, wait to see what happens from the Integrity Commission of the ANC. But as Mr. Naidoo just mentioned there, the test of the presidency with regards to what he's going to be doing in terms of really holding Minister Simelane to account. Again, these are allegations, but these allegations, there's no smoke without fire when you come to think of it with regards to really how detrimental VBS, the looting of VBS has truly been. So let us keep an eye on that, and let us see how this is really going to uncover itself as the days go forward. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus from myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Don't forget to subscribe to all our social media channels and also to our YouTube, Hilaal TV. I'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.